All right, to discuss this, let's bring in now Sky News host Steve Price and contributor Joe Hildebrand. Welcome to you both.
Good evening. How are you?
Steve, do you agree that this is lunacy and insanity?
Sure is. And look who's in charge now, Tony Burke. I mean, that's the decision the Prime Minister took when he reshuffled his front bench. And Tony Burke holds a seat in Sydney, which has a large Muslim population. He does not want to upset that population because he wants to retain that seat. So where was Tony Burke today when James Patterson was out saying all the right things? Where was Penny Wong? Where was the Prime Minister? I mean, it's just crazy that we would bring these people here. And when Tony Burke says, well, we're not going to send them back under any circumstances, he won't change his mind on that. And now that he's said it, he can't actually do it. So if ASIO suddenly finds out that one of these people that's come into the country who wasn't checked before they landed is now someone who is vocally supportive of Hamas, what do we do with them? I mean, do we arrest them and throw them into some sort of detention? That should happen, but I don't think this government will do it.
No. Joe, we couldn't have heard more times from the Prime Minister, from Penny Wong, from Claire O'Neill, oh, all the normal processes are being followed. And then we hear Mike Burgess say, well, actually, not all of them have been sent to us for background checks in time, implying they're already here.
Yeah, look, obviously it would be extremely concerning if any of the individuals who were given asylum did end up posing a threat. I think the more... the problem is you've got Hamas sympathisers who are already in Australia, who've been homegrown here, who've got even less of an excuse. We saw a great expose of an academic in The Australian who said that maybe Hamas were just like anti-colonial freedom fighters. We've had student activists go and...
Exactly, but I think it's different if people have been brought up on the front line in a war zone, indoctrinated.
That's right. My point exactly is, but my point is if you are brought up in Palestine, the level of propaganda and the way that that entire society is built around, despising Israel and thinking Israelis are evil and wanting to take back your homeland. You don't think Hamas is a terrorist organisation. That's the problem. People in the West have no excuse. We can see, and we know it's prescribed. People there could very easily, and you only have to look at the children's TV programs that they put out just depicting Jews in horrible ways. People there would have been brainwashed into thinking Hamas were, these heroic freedom fighters, and indeed Hamas won elections. And this is a security briefing I got from, a very Jewish, very senior security advisor to, I think it was George W. Bush, who was saying that Hamas won these elections by getting all these, local community leaders, doctors, the local pharmacist to run for elections. It was seen as this nice, touchy-feely grassroots community. And we know that they're also double agents who are posing as UN educators or UN workers at UNRWA. So, again, it's very disturbing, but the important thing is we expose Hamas for what they are and these people realise it.
Yeah. All right, let's turn to the drama surrounding...
Sharri,
I mean, go ahead, Steve.
Well, you've made the point before that the neighbouring Arab countries near Palestine are not taking these people. Why are we flying them all the way to the other side of the world when they live in Palestine? Yes, what's happening in Gaza is horrible, but why won't people in Egypt, why don't they go to Egypt or somewhere in their region, not as far away from where they live?
100%. 100%.
Why are we bringing any of them here?
I believe they have links to Australia, the people we're flying over, but certainly the other countries should be doing much more.
But
seriously.
But I think, Steve, potentially there are security concerns. I mean, there's not enough pressure put on Egypt either. Yeah. All right, let's turn to the drama.
I mean, remember that these people, remember, Sharri, that we found out on your program last week that they were processing visas within an hour. How do you do a security check on someone within an hour? That's ridiculous. Yeah,
it's just not possible. We've been reporting on the security flaws for months now. I hope, strongly hope, with every fibre of my being that it doesn't lead to an incident, but... we should be having our intelligence agencies checking people before they come here. It's just the most basic thing. Well, I would be happy to have access to more intelligence, Joe, than what's publicly available. Let's turn to Rachel Gunn. Her shocking breakdancing routine scored 0 marks. This bizarre performance has now been mocked and questioned by big names in the media and politics. Have a look.
I feel for Ray Gunn. Oh, it's so good. I think, isn't she, like, huge, though? Do you really need to feel for her?
What do you mean
Kinda
huge?
fun.
In what way?
Like
An embarrassment and a joke of the world. Yeah, it's embarrassing.
I have to ask you, because it's all that me and my friends have been talking about last night after the show and today. And I'm not saying anything. I think it's the best thing that's happened in the Olympics the entire time. Did anyone see the breakdancing lady yesterday from the Olympics?
I mean, it's overshadowed the number of medals that Australia won. We're now a laughingstock and an embarrassment. Well, Sky News digital editor Jack Houghton wrote that Rachel Gunn's university papers, because she's an academic, are just as bad as her dancing. He writes on the Sky News website that one of her papers is filled with this sort of gibberish, including suggestions breakdancing was a space for those who had been othered to express themselves and engage in new hierarchies of respect. You should read his article because it's a whole lot of woke nonsense. Joe, look, I think many people have been saying this, but you know kids, and I've got a 5-year-old boy, and he often no one teaches him how to dance, but his natural breakdancing, most mums would say this, are better than what we saw from her at the Olympics.
It's just incredible. It was incredible. And Parnell McGuinness raised the possibility, which I'm increasingly come to the view must be true, which is all just a massive troll, that this is a massive kind of practical joke on the global scale. It's like Angry Penguins. It's all a hoax, and then she'll write a dissertation about it, how she got through to the Olympics and just took the piss out of the whole thing. But I had much more sympathy for her before I read some of her academic work, which is the worst kind of turgid sludge. Like, it is what gives all of academia a terrible, terrible name. And then the claims that the criticism of her was somehow misogyny or that it was sexist. And now I'm kind of like, you know what? Now you deserve everything you get. But it was just absolutely, it was so bad that it either it's a spoof or she takes herself so seriously that it looks like a spoof.
But Steve, this isn't just Rachel Gunn's fault. Like, whoever's the head of the Australian breakdancing team, they could have found an 8-year-old who did a better job. Why put her up for this sort of international failure and embarrassment? The judges gave her a 0 score, so clearly she wasn't objectively good by anyone's standard.
No, it was a great look. Her work at university is a worse crime than the breakdancing, I think. But you're right. How did she ever get to become an Olympian and walk in the shoes of all of those brilliant athletes that we sent there? I mean, the only thing I'm sad about here is that the LA has dropped breakdancing from its program, which will be really bad news for Joe, because I think breakdancing about the only thing Joe could ever represent the country in as an Olympian. His chance has gone out window now.
I know. It's cruel. Won't someone think of the 48-year-old white breakdancers? You know, where's our time to shine? You know. The black kids have had
done a better job than her.
For too long. I know.
Anyone would have
Well, it's
done a
cultural
better job than
appropriation,
her.
Steve. I think that's my academic dissertation.
Maybe tomorrow night we'll play some of the clips of kids that the parents are posting online who have done better jobs. Now, the Australian's latest news poll today, I mentioned it a moment ago, has the Albanese government and the coalition neck and neck on the two-party preferred result. Steve, the primary vote, the coalition is at 39%. At this, and Labor at 32%. That's primary. So, Steve, with these results, Labor would still win and only would only lose 4 seats. I just don't think that's an accurate reflection of voter sentiment at the moment, given the cost of living crisis.
You're trying to trigger us. I mean, the worst result in any election would be a minority Labor government where they then have to deal with whoever Teal survives, and a lot of them won't, but some will. They say they won't deal with the Greens, but who would know if it got desperate, Anthony Albanese would do anything to hang on to his job, I would imagine. But can you imagine 2025 living in Australia it's bad enough under the Albanese government now, and I know Joe's a mate of Albo's, but I think he's a weak Prime Minister. But can you imagine living in a country where it was being run by Labor and they had to cave into a whole lot of demands from whatever Teal? I mean, I still have bad dreams about Julia Gillard dealing with Bob Catter and Rob Oakeshott, Tony Windsor. I mean, it took two weeks and made us all feel sick.
Yes. Joe, do you still think that Albanese is going to win the next election?
I think it will be minority government. I very much Steve and I are in perfect agreement that I very much wish that it was not minority government. I do not like minority governments. They will not deal with the Greens. There will be no coalition agreement.
They say that now. No one believes that.
There is no way they won't,
right.
and there's no way mathematically that they will have to. They don't want to deal with the Teals either.
They don't want to, but if it's a choice between retaining government and losing it,
that's right. If it's a choice between the Greens and the Teals, they would get to the Teals, but they'd have to lose a lot more than 4 seats before they have to deal with the Teals. So they only have to get to 72 seats, and they can still deal with another 4 independents to hold government without even touching the Teals or the Greens. They're not going to touch the Greens with a barge pole. You've heard what the Prime Minister has said about them. He despises them. They try to attack him and take his job at every single election in his own seat. They're barricading his office even as we speak. They're condoning the worst kinds of rhetoric about
he's happy to attack the Greens, but
Steve? So Joe, you're telling us we're going to be run by Anthony Albanese, Bob Katter, Andrew Wilkie, and Jackie Lambie. That'll be fun.
And Rebecca Sharkey, possibly. But yeah, no, it's obviously no one wants that, least of all anyone in Labor. They want a majority. But I'm just saying that it doesn't, even if Labor goes into minority government, it doesn't mean they'll be forming any sort of deal with the Teals or the Greens.
If the polls get so bad, I'd be interested to see if there's a push behind Tony Burke. It'll be fascinating.
I think we're at a nadir. I think it's been this low before, but I don't think things can sink much lower, and I think they will get better, especially as the new year comes. People start looking forward to an interest rate cut and the economy hopefully.
I think that's very optimistic, Steve, because things are getting worse. The RBA governor's just said we're not going to have an interest rate cut at least in the next 6 months, and the research shows that voters are starting now to blame Albo. The attitudes are starting to harden, so it could sink lower. What do you think? Do you think there could be leadership?
Yeah, they could. Well, I don't know about a leadership change. I mean, maybe. But cost of living is getting worse and worse and worse. You know, I visited my 90-year-old mother last week. I tried to work out on her power bill when she's getting the money that the federal government were going to roll out to all of us to get a cheaper electricity. I couldn't work it out. How's she supposed to work it out? And she's paying, $400 a quarter for electricity. She lives on her own in a small house. I mean, it is really tough for people out there. And look, I suppose Joe and Sharri, you'd both agree, this puts to bed any idea of an election this year. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, We've been saying that for months, Joe.
I know, I have been the whole time. I thought it would be suicide. I thought it would be insane. You wait until you get an interest rate cut behind you and people are starting to feel more optimistic, and then you go after that. For a while, it looked like we weren't going to get that. It now looks like there's going to be one in the sort of the first quarter of next calendar year. And I can guarantee there will be no leadership spill. You can take that to the bank. That is absolute. People might be trying to stoke that from the other side to try and to bump it up, but there is absolutely no way. Labor would never do that again, I promise. Guaranteed.
Well, we'll see. I don't know.
Short?
I think if the primary vote sinks lower, Tony Burke is so ambitious, he could mount an argument with his supporters that, the only chance they have to hold on to government and to save the furniture.
I don't think so. Tony Burke is a very, very capable minister, and he's the minister for everything these days, and he's the sort of Mr. Fix-It that you go to when you want a problem solved. But even if there is not, and there won't be, but the heir apparent to Anthony Albanese is not Tony Burke, it is Jim Chalmers.
100%. I think that Tony Burke's suggestion as Prime Minister is utterly absurd, but this is what he thinks. He keeps putting himself forward as the next PM. Anyway, we're out of time. Steve Price, Joe Hildebrand.
Thanks, Sharri.